Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Talks Daily podcast, where every single day we explore the most exciting innovations and trends in technology and how they're actually reshaping our world. And I'm your host, Neil C. Hughes, and today I've got a great guest lined up. We're joined by Lars Christensen. He's a titan of the banking industry and now the chairman of Concordium, which is a layer one science-backed blockchain that's pioneering new ways to create a safer digital world. And he's got an amazing backstory too. But before we get to that, I must introduce you to Concordium, which has also announced the launch of mysome.id, which is a groundbreaking social media profile verification tool that is designed as a secure and decentralized and reliable alternative to Elon Musk's Twitter Blue model, or X, or whatever it's calling itself these days. And I want to find out more on how that differs from other centralized verification systems and how mysome.id aims to address the rampant problems that we face in the digital era. And by that, I mean things like fake social media profiles, deep fake videos, widespread disinformation, data leaks, hacks in Web 2 centralized data storage, and that list goes on and on. So I've invited Lars to come on and join me today and share his insights on the crucial role of blockchain technology in essentially building a more secure future and the importance of privacy and control over personal information and the benefits of integrating identity solutions directly into the foundational blockchain. So much to get through today. We will talk about it all in a language everyone can understand, so buckle up and hold on tight because it's time for me to beam your ears all the way to Sweden, where Lars is waiting to share his story. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Lars. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
I spent decades in TradFi before the crypto space. I worked a few years in London, and at the back end of that, I started my own bank together with my partner, which was to become Saxo Bank, which essentially was one of the first online trading platforms in the world. I think when we brought out our first trading platform in late '97, there was maybe 25 million users on the internet, and it was one of the first attempts at making that industry more efficient. So a lot of those early internet days remind me a little bit about where we are in blockchain and crypto today. So I think it's interesting learning, and probably also that sort of search for transformative technology that got me involved in this space pretty early on. Had some friends that told me about Bitcoin back in 2011 and 12 or something like that, and I've followed it ever since. So this idea of transformative technology, I think, is something you keep looking for, and I think we have the best shot at this apart from since the internet, basically. So a lot of internet background, a lot of TradFi, but trying to sort of use some of that experience in this space that is developing in some of the same directions.
And before we started recording today, we were talking about your involvement in two of the most passionate communities online, I would say. Yes, we got blockchain and crypto, but you're also involved with FC Copenhagen too, right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm one of three owners of FC Copenhagen. I love my football, and that's certainly a very passionate industry as well. You got to watch your mouth there. You got 25,000 people telling you what you should have done better in the last show. You should sign up in the next window, but I love football, and I love FC Copenhagen, and have a lot of fun with it, although it's a volatile business too.
Yeah, 100%. And for anyone listening here about Concordium for the first time, can you tell me a little bit more about it, what it is, and also maybe offer a brief overview of mysome.id and explain how you're on this mission to enhance security and trust in online transactions that we're all doing every day seamlessly without thinking about what goes on under the hood?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I also followed this space for quite a long time and was quite the ambassador for Bitcoin back in the day, and trying to introduce that to some of my banking friends and make them understand the wiseness of decentralized systems, given that we've seen so many centralized failures in the TradFi industry. But I also sort of knew the Ethereum guys before they launched and was quite enthusiastic about that. But along the way, I also got a little bit concerned, because you have to remember, while I was doing this sort of Planet Blockchain in my free time. I was the CEO of an investment bank where we were inundated with new regulations and new laws on a continuous basis, and I found it a little bit difficult to reconcile. So I've been convinced for a very long time the regulation is coming to this space, and it won't look that much different to what we know from traditional finance. And hence, I felt there's some kind of middle ground that needs to be reached, particularly around anonymity aspects and security aspects. So that's why I set out with Concordium to build a well-functioning, science-based, solid piece of tech based on all the permissionless, decentralized things, all the things we like about this space, but combining that with a certain respect for the environment around you, and then also making it as ready for future regulation and compliance as possible. So it's kind of an attempt to merge the two things. I'm a great believer in decentralization, but I also know that there's a society around us that will impose itself. And I think while that wasn't a popular message 5-6 years ago, I think most people are coming around to realizing that is exactly what's happening. And I think that decentralized systems have so much to bring to not just finance, but many industries. But we also just have to recognize that world around will have some requirements around being able to identify people, being able to protect against money laundering, terror financing, etc., criminal acts in general, and finding a way to secure those aspects without compromising your own privacy around your ID, and actually improving the whole ID space is sort of at the core of what we build at Concordium, plus a lot of technical improvements, I would say. But that's really the sort of ideological difference between us and many other early generation blockchains.
And again, about that mysome.id, the website, I urge anyone to check that out. It allows anyone to verify their social media profiles with a self-issued badge of authenticity. And of course, for most people listening, they'll know that Twitter, Instagram, Facebook provide something very similar, such as Twitter Blue, and almost holding their users to ransom with that. But so what makes you guys a superior alternative, in your opinion?
Well, the issue of fake accounts and fraud on social media is a big one, right? I believe Facebook deleted more than 3 billion accounts last year. So it's a massive problem. And I've experienced it firsthand, people copying my profile. I'm quite active on social media and have like 100,000 plus followers. So I'm kind of a target for somebody copying my profile and then starting giving away Bitcoin, or what do I know? If you just send me a couple of $100 first, I'll do all sorts of good things for you. And it's very hard to close these things down, right? You have to actually go out and find a group of people that are willing to report it. Then maybe they get around to looking at it, and then maybe it gets handled after 24, 48 hours. But in the meantime, it can do a lot of damage. And not surprisingly, the next one pops up a week later, right? As it worked out, right? And I don't think these big tech companies are handling our identity with the respect that they deserve, in spite of them making all of the monetization on those same IDs, right? So yes, you can now begin to get the blue ticks, and either by paying for them or being some kind of celebrity that they decide you should be allowed one. But actually, first of all, it's very centralized controlled who gets them. Secondly, where you can buy them, I would say the verification is limited. You might have to verify a telephone number or a credit card or something like that. But we've already seen people abusing also these paid services, as you know, with significant consequences. So what we set out to do was say, why don't we deliver something that's under your control? You can put it on your favorite social media. It is absolutely safe and private in terms of identifying you to whoever you want to identify to. And that's a combination of verification on Concordium blockchain, which is with a passport or with a driver's license, with some liveness checks, etc. And then you control that ID. If you then link that up with a URL from your social media, well, anybody that goes on that can verify. If you display a QR code, they can verify that you are, in fact, the person that has been identified and that you're linked to this particular profile. somebody takes the QR code and moves it to a fake profile, necessarily the URL will be different and it will be flagged, right? So right now it's only launched for LinkedIn, but we will bring that to other social media, and that is I would say a much safer solution, something that you control, you display it where you want, you give out exactly the information that you want to give out, and there's a lot to it, but it's important to understand that the information that you have about yourself, you hold that. We verify that a credible ID issuer has verified that identity, but you control it. So it can also be used in many other contexts, in use cases where maybe a use case has a requirement for some knowledge of your ID. They can then request to you. You can answer what you want to answer, or refuse what you don't want to answer, meaning that you can control the amount of information that goes out around you. As an example, if somebody needs to know that you're over 18 for whatever reason, wants to sell you a bottle of booze or give you access to adult content, or what do I know? Well, that's what that project needs to know. It doesn't need to know your home address, your social security number, and all this stuff. It needs to know you're over 18. And with a self-sovereign ID, as we call it, you can provide exactly that information without giving up a lot of other information that are completely irrelevant, which is, of course, very different to locking in with your Google account or whatever, where a lot of information is shared automatically. So it's also very much a question of getting that ID back in your own control. So you decide who gets access to it. You can potentially monetize that with various use cases instead of handing it over and let other people monetize it. And in this particular instance, the mysome.id, well, you can choose to link the aspects of your identity to the URL on that mysome.id, meaning that anybody can verify that you are, in fact, the person that you claim that you are.
And it's an interesting comment you made there about the proving your age to view, let's say, adult content. There's a very similar argument here in the UK at the moment, because they're to stop children having access to adult content. They want to introduce a system where every single citizen will have to produce their proof that they're over 18. And that could involve uploading your passport details, your name and address, and all those kind of things. But of course, it's all fine, and it will stop children looking at that. But first of all, many people will say, well, what about VPN? You'd have to get over that straight away. And the second side is, what if that government database is hacked, or the government has got access to every single citizen's slight little kink or things that they are looking at? And citizens don't want that, do they?
No, and I think you're absolutely right. And this is actually an EU-wide discussion. We also have that discussion in my own home country, Denmark, where we are preparing a proposal for the Danish government for something that actually both achieves their objectives but allows privacy to the users. Because you're absolutely right. You know, I could imagine people wouldn't be overly excited about handing over all their IDs to a central database and then go watch something that maybe they don't want their wife or their neighbor to know about, right? Yeah. But these problems can be solved by and they can be solved actually completely safely with self-sovereign IDs, where you can prove this, but there's no access to a central database. And that is the problem that the internet brought. With all the good things that it brought, was that you ended up having to verify a lot of stuff when you went through an online service, say a bank. You would need your passport, your password, and your username, etc. And then it was kept in central databases, which are frequently breached, and then you're compromised. Often in isolated cases, unless of course you use the same password in many places, which people do, then you could be compromised in multiple places by one data breach, right? And I would say almost worse with the big techs sort of lock in with this or lock in with that, which is what we call a federated identity, where in essence they pass on a lot more information that's necessarily needed for that particular use case. So I would say that example, and there will be this legislation, I have no doubt, about restricting access to various sorts of content. And we're actually working on a solution that we have been asked to present. So we will come up with a solution that also protects your privacy, but achieves those objectives of being able to verify an age group, for example. But that could be many other things. You know, sort of longer term gain for this is what we call the Web3 ID, where you can also add what we call verifiable credentials that, a university could issue its credential that you did this or that exam or this or that education. Your insurance company could verify a credential that you have this or that insurance. A credit scoring agency could do that. But again, all of that under your control. So if you feel comfortable with delivering that information to a use case that might have a very good reason for asking for it, it could be an employment consultant or headhunter that wanted to know you did in fact have those educational achievements that you say, well, maybe you want to give that proof. It could be a lending protocol that wants to know that you have a good credit score and has a reason to ask that question. Well, there you could prove that, but it's all under your control. And I think that's the key thing. You don't want to give that information. Nobody can access it. Of course, they can then say, well, in that case, Mr. Christensen, we don't want to do business with you, and that you would have to accept. But they cannot just access a lot of information through legit means of various big tech databases or illegitimate means where they make a hack and simply extract it from a centralized database. So I think it's a very important development to get these self-sovereign IDs, because, per definition, that's got to be one of the most personal and private things you have. And you should be able to control who you share that information with. And if there's some monetization to be made, you should also be part of that monetization and not just leave that for people to harvest all the benefits while actually providing very pure protection of your ID, which is very much the case today.
One of the things that really stood out to me when I was reading up on what you're providing here is that how you're ensuring user privacy and transparency while also providing reliable identity verification. And I would imagine that is an incredibly tricky balance for anyone that wants to look under the hood. So how does that tool work to ensure that you manage to do all of that?
It is tricky if you go into all the technical details, but see, from a user perspective, it's a combination of the basic identity framework that we do on Concordium, that you identify yourself to a third-party identity issuer of your choice. We don't store the information. You get it. The only thing we store is that you went through that process and you passed it. So you are a verified person. You do have an identity. And after that, it sits in your wallet. You can decide who you display it through. So in essence, it's based on an immutable entry on the blockchain, and then you can use that in various use cases where mysome.id is one example where you're linking it up to a URL, but it could be a lot of other examples. And the privacy is ensured by the fact that you are the person holding this information, not us. The only thing we verify is that you went through such a process, you passed it and were verified. And the link between our registration of your private ID is that if you start telling that you are, you're 25 years old when in fact you are not, you're much older, well then it would flag up that there's a discrepancy between what was in that proof and what was actually registered. So in case a use case would ask to you privately, what is your age? What is your country of birth? What is your nationality? You can prove these things, but if you try to claim, well, I'm not Danish, in my case, I'm Swedish, it will immediately flag that is not what is stored here. And that is also by the use of what we call zero-knowledge proofs, which is a big discussion these days. But in essence, zero-knowledge proofs is something where you can prove the validity of a claim without giving all the underlying information that leads to that. And that's a well-known technology that can be verified by third-party auditors that it is in fact the truth that comes from that, but it preserves privacy for the very same reason. And we have some great scientists that actually invented part of this industry back in the day. So we have a lot of insight in zero-knowledge science in general and use it in this context and others.
And I suspect that many people listening, yourself and your community, are fully subscribed to the Web3 future that we're heading towards. We can all see it, but we're almost in a transitional period at the moment, and some people are still in that Web2 space, looking ahead, but maybe a little bit daunted by it or wondering what problems we're actually solving here. So just to bring that side to life, how does this protocol improve on, let's say, the traditional data storing methods used by Web2 tech companies, just so they can understand where we're heading and why it's so exciting and important?
Well, it's pretty much the same. And I mean, Web3 is a pretty fussy concept, right? And I mean, one issue with the blockchain industry is that we kind of, whenever there's a new buzzword out there, we try to appropriate it, right? Metaverse, can only be built on blockchain. Well, that's bullshit, to be honest, right? I mean, we've had metaverses for decades. Computer games could be argued to be metaverses, right? And you don't need a blockchain to build a metaverse. But what you do need, perhaps a blockchain in a metaverse, would be that it's very open to fraud, right? But I mean, one thing is you're on a traditional sort of Web2 service, but in a metaverse, for example, where the whole idea of avatars and trying to experience things being something that maybe you're not in real life. I mean, the need for, when you do have a serious interaction there, to actually know that you're dealing with the person, the individual that you think you are, would pop up in many respects. Of course, in business respects, in social relations, that in some cases you would want to know, right? I mean, I like it a little bit to, when you go down the pub and you order a beer, you don't run around asking everybody for their passports before you feel comfortable drinking a pint, right? But if you strike up a conversation and you take a bet on the football match on the TV and the guy says, I'll pay you tomorrow if I lose, well, then you might want to know his ID just so in case you can cash in if you should get it right, Yeah. And I think that's the role, certainly, for a Concordium type blockchain. We see ourselves as a piece of infrastructure that can just help build a safer world, but with privacy and under your control. So you share that information if you want to. People can ask you that information. If you want to share it, they can know that you're telling the truth. And I think all of this, and this problem is just getting bigger with AI, deepfakes, avatars, all this stuff. It will become absolutely crucial in the discussion in the next years, right? I mean, we are already at a point where realistically you can't be sure right now that you're talking to me. You could be talking to an avatar controlled by somebody that wanted to harm me or whatever, having copied my voice, which you can do with a 3-second sound clip today. So very shortly, probably even today, we cannot even be sure that it's you and me talking to each other. So there, the need for, in serious interactions, to verify that, I think is going to be everywhere, right? And deep fakes are going to explode, right? The technology is now so good, and we're actually working with avatars and with realistic presentations of humans, not to create deep fakes, but to, for example, make me be able to have this conversation in Chinese with you, right? Or distribute a content video in 20 different languages, but still having a personalized approach. I mean, this is completely valid, but you do want to know that it's actually me doing it and not somebody else to feel comfortable with it. So I think the whole Web2, Web3, I mean, I was just at the ECC conference in Paris last week, and, most of the use cases you're talking about, so to now actually want to move kind of from Web3 back to Web2, because people can't figure out all this integration with wallets and downloading this and downloading that. So now it's all about actually getting something that people can comfortably access, but making it more secure by anchoring it in a blockchain, so that the identities, the assets you might be trading, the stuff you're doing in a game where you're buying a sword or selling a shield, what do I know, that you can actually know that that you are the owner of that, and a transfer has taken place, and there's only 1,000 of them, and that's the role I see for blockchain in many, many Web3 contexts, is provide that additional security and safety in the transactions. We don't have to lay claim to all of it, but that's the role where we can add a really valuable service, because I would say I'm also have a great love for the internet because I started my business as we discussed in the beginning, and that worked out nicely to be an early adopter there. But the internet also opened up for a huge amount of fraud, right? Because it's so difficult to identify who or what that digital file or interaction where it derives from. Is it really the under the ownership of the person claims to be, et cetera, right? So I believe that that's what we're fixing with parts of the blockchain, and that's a great thing because that's the kind of problem layer in the internet that you can't really trust automatically what you're dealing with, and if you do, somebody will abuse it, right?
Yeah, 100%. I cannot thank you enough for coming on here and giving an overview of how you incorporate zero-knowledge proofs, scientifically backed cryptography, how they all contribute to the authenticity and privacy that you offer there, and also that huge problem of disinformation, fake social media profiles, deep fake videos. We've seen them all, but I'm conscious we will have many people listening from your community, and they're going to be listening. They know all this stuff. They're going to be listening for hints about what the future may or may not hold. And I know you're going to be locked down to various NDAs and can't speak too much about it. But to begin with, what future plans do you have for extending mysome.id support to other social media sites, maybe beyond LinkedIn? Are you able to hint at what platforms might be next?
Yeah, I think Twitter is a pretty obvious candidate. So that is probably is our next focus area. And then there's some of the more specialized channels like Discord and Telegram, where, you know, if you have a group, you would actually be able to, as an administrator of that group, to, if you feel the need. Some groups, again, like the pop, some groups need it, some groups not. But you would be able to secure that they're actually dealing with real people in your particular channel, right? So those are areas that we're looking at there, and then the general expansion of the ID. So it's not just about ID and basic aspects of your personality, but also, as I mentioned, you know, proofs of your education, proofs of, you know, memberships you might have, proofs of insurance, proofs of credit scores, etc. But again, I have to underline, under your control, not sitting in a central database where somebody can hack in and abuse it, or even share it willingly because you click a little button and say, I want to log in with this or that, because the cost of that is people get a lot of information about you that some of it may be fine, some of it not so much.
And finally, if we were to zoom out, are you able to offer any teasers around future developments of Concordium's overall ID strategy, especially the upcoming launch of Web3 ID and how that might unlock potential use cases on Concordium too?
Well, I think we're use case agnostic blockchain, and we actually have a lot of various activities from like big corporate use cases. We have, for example, the Danish energy grid building on this because they want to prove the origin of each hour of electricity. So does it come from solar? Does it come from wind? So that can help, first of all, keep an overview of it, and secondly, the buyers of this to prove their ESG profile, etc. Right? So that's sort of an example from the very corporate side of things and public sector side of things, but on a permissionless distributed blockchain. And then we have lots of games and stuff like that going on. But I guess at the other end of the extreme, so we are use case agnostic, but I guess who would gravitate towards us is people that see some advantages of being able to have this greater security around in project assets, around identities. Clearly, if you're doing anything in connection to the financial industry, which I don't think is the lowest hanging fruit, but will be very important for this industry, because at the end of the day, that's where a lot of people are, and that's where a lot of money is, right? But there, for sure, the ability to identify their customers will be paramount, right? And our idea is a little bit, instead of doing that in a siloed way, as a layer 2, I mean, we're not the only identity solution out there by far, and a lot of great people working with this area because it's important. But the idea of actually integrating it directly in the layer 1, directly in the foundational blockchain, so it can be used across use cases very easily, I think is fundamentally different to the way that people mostly do it. And I think that's the right way to do it, rather than creating silos on top. Although that can also have its arguments in certain cases, but it is kind of leading us a little bit back to where we came from. If you have to rely on a lot of layer twos in order to achieve the fundamental objective, well, then you're back to multiple points of failure. And I have a strong belief that you can build a layer one that actually solves the main issues around both scalability, ID, privacy, all of these aspects that should be solved by the layer one. And then the layer two can concentrate on where that's true value instead of having to fix lots of stuff that most layer ones can't handle.
Well, it's been a huge pleasure talking to you today. Also hearing about your story. You've had a hugely successful career spanning from technology, blockchain, crypto, and even the exciting world of football with FC Copenhagen. But of course, if we were to, instead of looking forward, look back for a moment, none of us are able to achieve any amount of success without a little help along the way. There might be a particular person in your life you're grateful towards. Maybe they inspired you, saw something in you, anything at all that might have just helped you get where you are today. Do you have someone like that? Who would they be? Maybe we'll give them a shout out and a little thank you to them.
Unfortunately, that person that I would immediately think of would not be able to hear it because he died recently. But I had the pleasure of knowing Jack Welch of GE fame, and a lot of people sort of see him as very much last century. But having met with Jack on a number of occasions, his sort of wonderful simplicity around things, that he could condense down the issues in a problem to a very, very clear definition, and then it's easier to deal with, I thought was quite inspiring. You know, he really had this ability to simplify things without dumbing them down, if you know what I mean, right? Yeah. When you sat with that guy and he said, give me a problem, right? With his squeaky voice, give me a problem. You know, because he loved business in all respects. So you start to describe a problem and you'd listen to you for 5 minutes and then you'd say, well, Lars, isn't what you're really saying the following? Bang, bang, bang. And you have to say, yeah, you're right, Jack, right? And that was his genius. And I mean, he was known for in GE, where they do a lot of different things, for anything from like air conditioning fans to nuclear power stations. But if you couldn't present what you wanted to present to him on an A4 page, he would send you back to do it again. Because if you were not able to quantify the most important things, he didn't have time to waste on it. So I thought he was very inspiring also around, you know, giving people clear objectives. You know, I mean, we want to go from A to B. B is where you want to get us. I'll leave you a lot of freedom as to exactly how to get from A to B. I will resource you so you have a fair chance of making that goal. I will take some sparring and feedback sessions with you along the way just to make sure that we're not diverging completely. But apart from that, give you a lot of responsibility for reaching the conclusion instead of me sitting telling you what to do. And he's spot on, because if you are having a big organization, you can't do everything yourself, right? First of all, it doesn't scale. Secondly, there's a lot of people that are much smarter than yourself, hopefully, if you hire well, right? So he inspired me a lot, and I would recommend anybody to read some of his books, you know, that are really nice in terms of how you keep a business simple. Life is not as difficult as some people want to make it. And yet, the one last thing I would mention is he also said, if you get something right, remember to celebrate and have fun and enjoy what you do. You need to love what you do, because otherwise you're not going to be very successful at it, most likely. Even if you are, you probably won't be very happy. So if I should mention anyone, he's a great shout from the past, Jack Welch.
Love that, man. What a powerful moment to end on. And for anyone listening, wanting to find out more about all the things that we talked about today, maybe they want to join your community, contact your team, where would you like to point everyone listening to?
I think the easiest would be to simply go to our website, concordium.com, where you can then, from there, obviously see a lot of information around what we do, but you can also find all of our various channels, of which there are plenty. If you have a preference for a different channel, then you can find your way to all of our various communities there. And if you have any questions, we're there to answer them for you. So concordium.com.
And I'll add links to everything there so people can find that nice and easily. And there's so much we covered today, from your origin story to today's digital identity tools, and how you're solving problems there, including everything from fake social media profiles, bots, widespread disinformation, data leaks, data hacks, Web 2, centralized data storage. Covered so much. I urge anyone to check you out. But more than anything, just thank you for sharing your story and your insights with me today.
Thanks very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
And there you have it, folks. A truly enlightening conversation with Lars today, chairman of Concordium. And through the creation of mysome.id, it's great to see how Concordium is challenging those centralized models of digital identity, and in doing so, promoting privacy, verifiability and transparency. And essentially, I think by moving our digital identities into our own hands and into a more secure environment, Concordium is leading us one step closer to that safer Web3 future. And if you are listening and are very new to this space, I hope talking about a language everyone can understand really helped get you on board today, and how the future is not something to fear, it's something to celebrate. And a big thank you to Lars for sharing his profound insights on blockchain technology, self-sovereign IDs, verifiable credentials, and how these elements together are essential for the future of online transactions, identity verification, and our overall digital safety. But these are just my takeaways, and each and every one of you will have something completely different. Some of you will agree with what I just said, some of you won't. That's the nature of this space. But I champion all different opinions on here. So if you'd like to come on here and share your story, there's an invite there waiting to go. If you want to send me a message, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, just at Neil C. Hughes, let me know your thoughts. We'll keep this conversation going. But that's it for today. So we'll continue to explore the latest advancements and trends in the tech world and beyond. But until next time, keep innovating, transforming the world around you. And until next time, don't be a stranger.